We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. With me, as always, is Tom Fuentes. A wealth of information, put it one way to describe him. We're going to, once again, brush up against this border issue and explain to you that this is a defining moment for the country. You know, I sit here and I ask a question, sounds rhetorical in nature, but it's not. I would really like someone to explain to me who's supposed to benefit from this border policy. It isn't the migrants, I can tell you that. If coming to this country met their expectation of sleeping on sidewalks, I guess we met their expectation, but I somehow suspect that wasn't quite it. This is a problem that is going to hamstring this country in the future if we don't get a handle on it. I am gravely concerned as to what's going to transpire in the next year before this administration faces possibly a change. You know, I ask everyone, guys, stop looking at things through your political lens, you know, your political agenda, and look at things through the eyes of your children and their future. Maybe it'll alter the way you think. You know, we have so much hate for this guy Trump that we're prepared to flush the country down the toilet to prevent him from becoming president again. And I'm not endorsing Donald Trump, and neither is Tom or any number of people. But what's so interesting is we're facing a choice, once again, referred to as the lesser of evils. And that's not how our system should be set up. Now, interestingly enough, there is some rumbling in the air about Joe Manchin possibly making a run at this. You know, we haven't heard Robert Kennedy's name in more than a few weeks, to be candid with you. And I'm just trying to understand how democratic the Democrats are. You know, we're just censoring our own, to put it to you politely. And if you go back a month or two with hearings with Wasserman Schultz that accused him of anti-Semitism, which was a bit humorous considering she has Tlaib Omar Jayapal in her party spewing anti-Semitism, but more importantly, trying to censor him. For whatever reason, the only 24-hour news cycle that gives him any airtime is Fox. MSNBC doesn't, CNN doesn't, NBC doesn't, ABC and CBS don't. I don't understand this, guys. Something else I just want to brush up against just very lightly, you know, coming from New York, which I'm quite proud of. You know, listen, I'm not perfect, but I learned a lot growing up there. I had an interesting journey there, and it continues. I have a lot of friends that are Jewish. A lot of people have been very good to me in my life. I've been Jewish. The people that have been good to me haven't been defined by Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or whatever. It just happens to be that way. I've had some great Latino friends too. Recently passed away gentleman Hector Santiago, who was what they call an 01, one of the leads on a police commissioner's detail. He succumbed to 9/11 illness. Incredible person, Hector Santiago, Puerto Rican. New York's kind of like that. But I have a really interesting question for the Jewish community. How in the wide world of sports are you guys supporting the Democrats? Because it's rampant with anti-Semitism. And that doesn't mean that some doesn't exist on the Republican side, because narrow minds exist everywhere, guys. If you've got time to hate because of someone's religion or the color of their skin, you know, their lifestyle choices, their culture, you have too much free time. Let me put it to you that way. I don't know how else to say it in a simplistic term. You know, I liken myself to being a conservative liberal, because I'm very conservative when it comes to when it comes to your safety. I don't negotiate. Socially, I'm extremely liberal. You know, I really don't care what people do in their personal lives. Other people may not hold that view. I'm just speaking for myself. Your culture, I think we've all benefited from the many cultures that have come to this country, you know, from all over the planet. Although, as I've before expressed concern, I express it again. How many different cultures, ethnicities, religious denominations, et cetera, are we going to house under one roof and think that everybody's going to be happy? It ain't happening. You can't have 4 children in one household and all be happy at the same time. No less 360 million people. Whose idea was this? It wasn't the idea of the founding fathers, by the way. And while I'm mentioning them, I do want to mention something else to you, which is a bit of irony attached to it. You know, we talk about gun control in this country. We had another mass shooting up in Maine. You know, we have a mental health problem in the country. God forbid our elected officials or any of these people that call themselves journalists or whatever they call themselves, maybe they're game show hosts, tell you the truth about what's going on in your country. We have a mental health problem, guys. We have a failed parenting problem. Toughest job I've ever had, and I've done some pretty hairy things, none of which I discuss for obvious reasons. Nothing compares to raising my children. Nothing. I'm not a guy that succumbs to stress. Everything rolls off my back. I'm on pins and needles 24 hours a day with my children because of this world they're growing up in, their immediate safety and their future. I wish everyone else was. Push your politics and your agenda aside and start to vote for people who are going to protect your children and ensure their future. Try that on, for instance. And, you know, maybe we'll get this country back on track. As I said to you a moment ago, maybe we don't have the best choices staring us in the eyes right now, as far as presidential candidates. But I want to say one thing to you, and this is irrefutable. Look at the condition of this country prior to 3 years ago and look at it now. And if everybody or anyone thinks that we're going in a good direction, we need to sit down and have a conversation with you with some civility and decency and respect. 3 words that have left our conversations in general. And attached to it, common sense, logic, and reason. Explain to me what in the hell is going on at your borders. Explain to me, how does it benefit to let the criminal element act with impunity and ravage your cities? I listen to people like Gavin Newsom say things like, corporations come to California to flourish. What planet are you on? You've had 21 corporate entities, Starbucks, Nordstrom's, Walgreens, just to mention a few, that have left your city. What planet are you on? Or do you think the exercise is to lie to the American public? What the hell is going on here? And that applies to people on the Republican side too, because we've got some loose cannons sitting on that side of the aisle. You know, there's too much agenda attached to everything we do. Although if you do want to have an agenda, let that be the truth. It's not about the truth, folks. It's about promoting their own causes. And believe me, when you elect someone in this country, don't assume that they're going to go out and necessarily be concerned with what's in your best interest, and more importantly, what's in the best interest of your children. That just isn't so. And that's on both sides of the aisle, guys. I want to bump into something, and I said this earlier about the borders or the migration problem we're having. Everyone coming into the country, regardless of origin, don't care how you get here, your DNA and your fingerprints, it will enable law enforcement to keep a handle on the culture. Guys, they have had mine. They've had Tom Fuentes for over 50 years. We're not out here breaking the law. I don't care who has my DNA or my fingerprints. You're never going to tie me to a crime. It's not my mindset, period. So let's start to entertain this so we at least have some accountability, because something else that we haven't mentioned in prior shows sufficiently is the fact that a lot of the migrants are engaging in criminal activity, and we're commingling it with the general populace. In other words, we don't separate it out and say we had 100 robberies and 50% of them were committed by migrants. The crime that they're engaging in is just staggering, because they're all trying to survive here. I know they're on the dole. We're giving them housing and medicine and food. And actually, I don't know if we're giving them housing unless you consider sleeping on a cardboard box housing. It could be a whole different redefined concept, but that's what's going on in our country. Maybe we need to examine the reinstatement of an immigration policy that dealt with a certain number of countries, but excluded others. And now I'm going to go right to Tom Fuentes, because Tom has a very clear understanding about where that comment is going to. Tom, if you would further elaborate on this restriction of certain countries, yet not others, like Indonesia. Am I correct, Tom?
Yeah, I'll explain that back during the Obama administration, his administration identified 7 countries that the administration was told by the FBI, by the CIA, that there was no way to vet people from those countries. We did not have a relationship, or they did not have a police force that was operating, or intelligence, or any kind of an effective government. Here's the 7 countries: Iran, Syria, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Sudan, and Yemen. So anyway, Obama's out of office, Trump comes in. Trump says, okay, I'm going to put the ban in on those countries. Very countries that Obama selected with the advice of our security services, because we had no relationship with those countries to get information, or they didn't have the capacity to get the information. And so the ban went in. Then there's a hue and cry in the United States. It's a Muslim ban. Oh, we have lawsuits. We have judges saying, stop it. No banning. It's banning Muslims. It's terrible. Islamophobia. Well, it turns out that the biggest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. Indonesia has about, at that time, it was about 50 million people less than the US. So it was about a population of about the high 200,000s, 250 to 300,000. Indonesia, about 85% Muslim, has more Muslims then and now than every country of the Middle East, Africa, and Europe combined. That's your largest. There's no ban on them. The FBI had a close relationship. And in fact, we had an office in Jakarta, Indonesia, which was one of the offices under my command. Secondly, Malaysia is the next biggest Muslim population. And we have an FBI office in Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia. Great relationship with that country. I was just there 3 months ago. Same thing, great relationship. So the countries that were banned were countries where our government has no official relationship with their government, and or their government doesn't even have the capacity to identify bad guys. So that was the ban. It took Trump about, 2 years of litigation with the courts to finally have the courts decide, well, you know what? He's the president. He can issue an order like that, even though the countries were picked by Obama. So that's the issue with the so-called ban. Now, Trump has said recently, as a candidate, yes, he'll put that ban. Nothing's changed. Those countries are still not in the position to help us in any way with their population when they try to get into our country.
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
I want to say something else and piggyback that so the public understands this, our listeners and our viewers. Many countries in this world don't have databases. You guys are all spoiled in the United States. We push buttons. We could give you dates of birth and social security numbers and help you with your credit and help you with your driving record and find out if you had a conviction and can you get it expunged. There's a lot of data that's stored in the United States. That isn't a universal concept, ladies and gentlemen, just the same way we don't screen for infectious diseases all over the world. You think everybody's doing business the way we are, and they don't. And that attaches it to Tom's observations regarding our ability to vet people. The databases don't exist. Not to mention, for example, and I mentioned this in the prior show, people coming over the southern border are changing their identity as we're changing underwear on a daily basis. How are we going to verify any of this? We are just indiscriminately allowing people into this country we know nothing about. What type of policy of this is this? This is treasonous. Your FBI director, Tom is not a fan of, by the way, 6 months came out and said, southern border is a threat to your national security. That would have been my wake-up call if I was the president, or if I was the attorney general, or if I was in charge of Homeland Security, or if I was Kamala Harris, the border czar, all of who have committed treason, guys. We just don't say it. I don't know what the deal is with the Republicans. They keep throwing the word impeachment around. Why don't you throw the word that's part of your impeachment? It's called treason. What's happening in your country today is treasonous, ladies and gentlemen. You're experiencing it on a real minuscule level in the city of New York. That's the fallout of treasonous activities. We are threatening to destroy the city of New York. What are you waiting for? Till it destroys the country? And it's coming. We cannot manage who we have here now. Yeah, let's keep letting more people in. That seems like a good idea. Actually, this whole border policy, I love this expression. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I've been talking to you about this since we were on this podcast known as Between the Lines. We've now rebranded Operation Truth. I remind you, Operation Truth Official at gmail.com. Get involved in this conversation. We're telling you the truth, independent of politics. We would be equally critical if they were Republicans perpetrating this immorality. Who's supposed to benefit from this policy? It isn't the city of New York or Chicago. It isn't Texas. It isn't these border towns in Arizona and Texas, who, by the way, run by Democrats who are screaming the loudest voices. Someone explain to me what's going on here. Someone explain to me how it benefits any community to allow a criminal element to operate with impunity without consequence. All your major cities, basically. I don't know what to say to you guys. This is your country. We're trying to nudge you along in this conversation to give you an alternative to this nonsense you hear on Fox, MSNBC, and NBC. And let me say one thing so we're clear. Each of those media outlets have some responsible journalists. The overall agenda is wrong. What's really confusing me, because I'm listening to this now, the Jews control the media. How can the Jews control the media if, in fact, the messaging coming out of MSNBC and CNN is on the cusp of anti-Semitic? Guys, I don't hear any outrage. I don't hear any outrage from Adam Schiff. He's Jewish. Bernie Sanders, who's Jewish. Chuck Schumer, who's Jewish. We could just, what's her name? Wasserman Schultz, who's Jewish. Where's the outrage? Interesting. Very interesting. Let's keep chasing Trump. We should let Trump go away. If you want to move past Trump, you got to let him go away. When you turn on MSNBC, as I did 2 weeks ago, because I watch all of these guys, the expression is you keep your friends close and the enemy closer. And the media is your enemy today, guys, because they're creating your narrative and your optic, and they're not interested in the truth. They're selling an agenda. They've decided to become part of your political parties. All they did for 2 hours was talk about Donald Trump, Joe Scarborough, and I'm still trying to figure out what the background is of Mika Brzezinski, that she's an authority on so many things. I know who your dad was, but what the hell does that have to do? How did you become somebody that could provide information or guidance regarding any of these topics we're talking about? And Joe Scarborough, and I liked that show prior to the Trump administration. They were kind of middle of the road. They went off the rails here. They're just so distorted and unbalanced in the way that they think. Guys, everybody's argument has merit. The minute you think other than that, you're not thinking in a productive manner. You have to embrace everything people say. Don't invalidate how they feel. That's where the word compromise comes in, by the way, which is another word that left the conversation. Tom, I want to ask you about this pursuit of the Roman Catholics by Christopher Wray and his FBI and the people we actually should have been pursuing. Can you give us a little insight on that?
Yes. Back on January 23rd, the Richmond office of the FBI put out a memo saying that they were going to, among other things, that they were going to start investigating, try to infiltrate, try to develop informants in the Catholic Church of Richmond, Virginia. And the reason was they do one of their masses in Latin. Now, Lou, you went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school. Up until about the mid-1960s, all the Catholic masses in this country and around the world were in Latin. Then what happened is they had an ecumenical council, they called it, in Rome. And Vatican II came up with a decision, which later the Pope issued an edict based on that, that masses around the world, in order to keep from losing so many Catholic members of those churches, that they should do the masses, instead of every mass being in Latin, they should be able to do it in the language of the host country of that church. So if it's in the US, do it in English. If it's in France, do it in French. If it's in Indonesia, do it in their language, but do it in the host country language. Now, then people our age, or maybe a little bit older, who remember or were altar boys in the early 60s or in the 50s said, I miss Mass in Latin. That was really beautiful. It really sounded nice having this traditional Latin Mass. Even if they didn't understand a word of it, at least it sounded like their childhood Mass. So that was the decision that churches were allowed to pick whether they wanted the host country language or still do it in Latin or a mixture of both. Well, now the FBI decides in Richmond that if they're doing masses in Latin, they must be a domestic terrorist organization. They're going to infiltrate. They're going to develop informants in that church. They're going to do all of this. So this memo becomes public after the January 23rd issuance. Early February it becomes public. Christopher Wray testifies in the House and Senate, different committees, that his exact words were, when I heard this, I was aghast. And I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I immediately ordered an inquiry, find out what happened in Richmond. How did this come about? Who signed off on it? Who recommended it? A regular internal inquiry. Now, in my career, coming up the line, I was an inspector at one point, spent over a year doing that. We went to different field offices to inspect them for efficiency and abiding by the rules. And we did internal inquiries. So an inquiry like Christopher Wray talks about in Richmond, I had done those. When I heard that inquiry was ordered, I thought, okay, that'll take maybe 2 weeks, probably less, but at the most 2 weeks. Send an inspector with a team of assistant inspectors, fly to Richmond. They wouldn't use their own internal people, send agents not familiar with that division there and find out. Get the whole story of how that memo was produced. Who authored it? Who signed off on it? Who'd they contact? Get to the bottom of it. Should have taken 2 weeks. Now, July, Wray testifies before Jim Jordan and his committee in the House and Josh Hawley questioning him in the Senate. And Wray says the same thing. Way back when in January, when I heard about that memo, I was aghast. And I ordered an inquiry. And both Jordan and Howley and their committee said, are you finished with that inquiry? No, it's still ongoing. When are you going to be done? Probably by the end of summer. So what should have taken 10 days or less is now going to take 10 months. And then when Wray says that, he says, as soon as we finish, I'll immediately report the results to you. Now, we're way past the end of summer now by a couple of months. Has anybody heard what the results were, or did Wray just hope that went away and nobody brings it up? And by the way, Wray said also it was a one-off, only the Richmond division. Now, a couple of months ago, when he's testifying in July, it comes up, oh yeah, the Portland division, the Los Angeles division, other divisions of the FBI also had those similar orders. Go into Catholic churches, and if they're doing the Mass in Latin, investigate who runs that church, who's a member, who are the priests, who are affiliated with it, because they're radicals. They're domestic terrorists. So that's why I said when Wray testified that he was aghast, okay, maybe he was aghast that it came out publicly. But later in July, when he says, we're going to get to the bottom of it, the inquiry's been ongoing since January, will be done by the end of summer, he's lying. I did those kind of inquiries. They don't take more than a few days, 2 weeks at the most, not 10 months.
Tom, let me ask you this. Who is it the FBI should be looking at? Because we spoke about this before we came on air.
Well, Christopher Wray put out statements midsummer, July, August, September, that the number one threat to the United States continues to be MAGA, Trump supporters, highly Republican supporters of Trump. That's the enemy. Now, you remember that Biden had that press conference where there was, Marines standing in the red glow. It was a very George Orwellian type statements that he made. And in that, he said the same thing. Major threat to the U.S. national security is MAGA or supporters of MAGA, extreme right wingers. That's our threat. So now, they put out these statements a few weeks before the October 7 attack of Hamas on Israel. Now people are saying, oh, wait a minute. Hamas is also vowing attacks on the U.S., and we've had 8 to 10 to 20 million people illegally cross into the United States since Biden took over and abolished all of the Trump rules, guidelines, et cetera, that were in effect during the Trump administration. And so that's the new threat. But they're kind of diminishing it because now you have security people saying, we're probably, not possibly, probably going to have an internal attack in the U.S. on American citizens by Hamas or Hezbollah or other supporters of Islamic terrorist groups because they're already here. And analysts are saying that Hamas and Hezbollah have training camps in Mexico. So they can train in Mexico. And if they're not already in the United States, they can easily walk in like everybody else is still doing. And that's the real threat. But they want to downplay it because what happens now, if there's an attack on a U.S. structure, whether it's a cyber attack on our water pumping plants, our electric grid plants, our aviation radar systems, air traffic control systems, whether it's a cyber attack or explosives and firearms attack in this country, and Americans die, and it's Hamas or Hezbollah behind it, how are they going to say that it didn't happen because the borders have been open for 3 years and we don't care who comes in?
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free rare coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
Guys, I hope you're listening. That's all I can say to you, because what Tom is telling you is factually based. This isn't conjecture, opinion, or speculation. And we're not asking you to be spoon-fed. Go do your own little research here. You're going to find this quite interesting. I'm going to transition to something just quite briefly. It has to do with the Pope is now backing gay marriage. It was nice for them to get into the right century with us, but having gone to 16 years of Catholic school, and I spent a lot of Sundays in church, starting in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Nativity Cathedral, which was some beautiful structure. The Catholic Church's position has been no birth control, no abortion, no divorce, and anti-gay. So I would just ask you guys, just very gently and on your own time frame, try to get into the right time frame with us, guys. And they're not the only religious denomination that there are problems with. After growing up Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I had to take, I believe it was 15 credits of theology to get my bachelor's degree from St. John's. I majored in philosophy. Give you another chuckle. 21 credits, enough for a minor in political science. I have a pretty clear understanding of religion, and it's why I'm not in favor of organized religion. I'm not talking about belief in a higher being. That's not the discussion here. It has to do with religious groups in general. And if we're looking at what's going on right now, there's a lot of religion attached to what's going on in the Middle East, in this anti-Israel movement we have going on. We mentioned in the last show there were like 300,000 protesters, anti-Semitic in nature, in London. And there were some visuals. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. You have to see the number of people in the streets there. Where do you guys all have time to hate? And who's inciting this? Another question, Tom, that we need to brush up against very quickly here. They talk about levels of support for Israel. As I mentioned in the last podcast, Israel is a cornerstone to this country for a lot of reasons. It has strategic positioning. It is westernized. It is a friend and an ally. We've had some little bumps and grinds with them as far as their operatives in our country, to be candid with you. But I think everybody does that. It's not the end of the world as long as we keep our heads screwed on tight on what the real big mission is, and that has to do with the preservation of Western civilization, which doesn't lend itself to the extinction of any other civilization, whether it's Middle Eastern or European or Asian. I don't know why everybody just can't play nice in a sandbox, but I always go back and say people don't know how to treat pets, no less people. It's another discussion. But as far as the support for Israel, it has to be unconditional. What's so interesting is we poured over $115 billion and the president's asking for another $60 billion. This is factual for the Ukraine. And they're dotsy doing around $14 billion for Israel. I think we got this a little on the wrong side of the fence here, folks. We should have as much and as many resources poured into Israel. And I'm going to say something to you, and I want you to hear this quite carefully. If the United States, among others, do not unconditionally support Israel, there'll be no Israel because they've got many fronts that they're fighting. And Tom pointed out something in a prior discussion about a behind-the-scenes support of other countries who understand Israel's agenda and going after Hamas. Hamas is Hamas. They make them sound like they're like campers. They have videos supplied by Hamas as to the heinous nature of their actions or their activities in Israel, which of course we're not going to have time to talk about, but we will talk about in the next podcast how this slipped through the cracks. And did it slip through the cracks, folks? But we're going to stay on point right now as far as supporting the Israelis. We have a couple of carrier fleets in the Mediterranean. Tom, is that correct, sir? Can you
Yes, sir.
speak further to that?
Well, we've sent a couple of carriers, and the carriers travel with destroyers, cruisers, other supporting cast, let's say, to help protect the carrier. And usually they have one or two submarines that go with them also to protect them. Now they're in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and the second group coming around the other side. And, for them, the Mediterranean, that part of the Mediterranean is like a pond. Those carriers and those accompanying ships are designed to go into the major deep blue sea and protect anywhere in the world that they need to get set. And we have many carrier groups that can be. But right now, the Gerald Ford, which is the most sophisticated carrier we have, which even has laser weapons on it, and some of the jets that are on there have laser weapons that can be launched. And when a laser weapon is fired at a target, it's extremely pinpoint accurate, and it travels at the speed of light. So push the button, boom. Immediately you have the results of launching that weapon. Now, these ships are there. Now, we have planes on each of the ships. We have a couple thousand Marines assigned with that. And the sorties or missions that can be done by the hundreds of planes on that ship, if they rotate them 24 hours a day, which they do, they could put about 30 fighter aircraft in the air at a time, and bring them back, and then the next group go out. They just go back and forth. Now, the only other issue with them is that if these ships send planes which attack Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, then the problem is that they might not have enough fuel to go round trip to Lebanon back to the carrier. They might have to refuel in Israel. And the question there is, if Iran, if Turkey, if Hamas, Hezbollah, if they're launching thousands of missiles on Israel, will it be safe for our aircraft to land there to refuel? Maybe, maybe not. So there's a lot of tactical issues that come up with our carriers that are already stationed on point there.
You mentioned a country, Turkey, Tom.
And Turkey is an interesting country. Even though it's part of NATO, theoretically should be an ally of the United States, fellow NATO country. But Turkey, these countries have a couple 100,000 soldiers. Israel, they estimate 350,000 to 400,000 soldiers that can be deployed to attack. The IDF, Israeli Defense Force. Now, Turkey has 1 million, and they have 1 million reservists, and a sophisticated Air Force, and a Navy. They have all these resources in Turkey, and the head of Turkey, Erdogan, wants to be the leader of the Islamic world. Now, one of the issues with Islam, going back 1,000 years, is that when Islam was formed, Muhammad died before they established a succession management program. They didn't know Should they just pass father to son like the monarchy does, like a king passes to the prince? Or should they have elections like the Catholic Church, elect a new pope to be the leader of the thing? They didn't have either one. So the Shia movement, which is mainly Persian, and the Sunni movement of Islam, which is mainly Arabs, they've been fighting each other and killing each other the whole time. When I was the FBI's commander in Iraq, we had Sunni and Shia blowing up each other's mosques in Iraq during the height of the war when we're fighting, Saddam Hussein's people. So this has been going on for centuries until now, where people are saying, the one thing that's happened here as a result of Israel going into Palestine to root out Hamas is that now you have both sides agreeing to fight the enemy of Israel and the United States. So suddenly, after centuries, Shia and Sunni are not killing each other. They're banding together under the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So suddenly, both of them are Israel enemies of us. So they're friends with each other at the moment. But that's highly volatile, how long that lasts.
Well, guys, as you can tell, never a shortage for discussion or factual information. More importantly, the truth. We're going to wrap it today. Not going to give you a long-winded critique on the condition of the country. You've heard me speak to it plenty of times. We're at a crossroad here in the country. Next time we convene, we're going to have a discussion about this problem that the Republicans have with abortion, which is why they got their clocks cleaned once again this few days ago. They're just having a hard time getting a memo regarding this issue and our women. It's an interesting one. The other thing I'm going to talk to Tom about is the debunking of this information regarding the beheading of children. I want to get into that this next podcast. So stick with us, guys. This has been Operation Truth. My name is Lou Palumbo. You've had Tom Fuentes, my co-host, with you today. Please contact us through operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Become part of this conversation. It's very, very important, guys. We're not doing this because we have nothing better to do with our time. We're gravely concerned about this country, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans and as parents. And that's really my concern. The poor young people who are getting this in the shorts. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to plugging into you guys again, and don't be shy about communicating. Tom, I thank you as always.
Thank you, Lou.
Good day, guys.